Good morning, students. This is Mr. Rubel with what I'd like you to do in math. We're going to actually do something pretty fun, working with fraction towers. Before we get into that, right at the beginning of the video, I'm going to talk about how we use and take care of our fraction towers. And I'm going to try and use this chair to sort of allow me to use both hands to show you how to use fraction towers. So here's a tip for your substitute teacher. You might want to replay this part of the video at the end. Excuse me. First things first, when you get your fraction towers, they should be nice and neat in a bag like this. Please take a close look at that because I expect every single fraction tower set to be back in a bag and put together correctly, as I'm going to show you now. So, first step is make sure you do not lose your bag. Keep your bag handy. When you're putting these away, you're going to put them in order with the one hole bar in first at the bottom of the bag. And then you're going to find the halves because it's a pattern. Then we go with the 2, 1/2. 2 is the denominator. 1/3, 3 is the denominator. 1/4, 4 is the denominator. I hope you're finding the pattern here. 5ths, 6ths, and it goes like that. So we put them back in the bag like that after we make sure that we have 1, 2, which is the halves, 3, which we call the thirds, 4, which we call the fourths, 5s, which we call the 5ths, 6th, 7ths, I think are in here. Nope, no 7ths. 8ths, we also have 10ths, and we have 12ths. And I don't believe the sets come with 9ths. So that's how I expect all of them to be put away and stacked neatly and in order, not sideways. You're expected to be able to do that. Alright, let's get on to the fun of our lesson. We're going to use these nifty fraction towers to try and find equivalent fractions today. Equivalent fractions are fractions that use different numbers, but they're worth the same amount. So the first thing you're going to need to know is, how do I actually use these fraction towers to make and read fractions? So we're going to take a look at this right here. First thing that you need to know is that this big red block right here with the number 1 on it is equal to 1 whole. I drew a picture of myself because yesterday we talked about how you can think of yourself as 1 whole, and your waistline is 1/2 and your knees is 1/4. So that is equal to 1 whole. Now if I pull out the fifths here, if I have 5/5, that's also equal to 1 whole. Do you see how they're exactly the same size? They are equivalent fractions. We can think of this 1 whole as like 1 whole person. We can think of this 1 whole as 1 whole candy bar. That's 1 whole. Now, if we wanted to make a fraction, first thing we would need to do to make a fraction is we have to make sure that all of the little pieces we're using are the same color, that they all say the same fraction on it. I'm going to use 1/5. So this says right here 1/5 on it. They all say 1/5. So if I made a fraction like this, and I pushed them all together and made a fraction tower, that fraction would actually be not 1/5, but it would be 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. That would be 1/5 4 times, and that would actually equal 4/5. I'm going to show you that again. I'm going to take my tower. Remember, see, 4/5 is not equal to 1 whole. It's smaller. But let's say that this is a fraction tower that I was playing around with and I had made. I wanted to figure out how to write down what the fraction was to go with it. Well, I would count the pieces in there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 would end up being my numerator, my top number, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Okay? My bottom number is going to be whatever the type of fraction is. Right here it says that it is fifths. So my bottom number would be the denominator on the fraction tower itself, 5. So 4/5. Fifths is what I'm using. The denominator is 5 because that's the bottom number on the fraction tower. The top number, the numerator, comes from how many of those pieces I used. I used 4 pieces in this tower. I made a fraction tower that was 4/5. So I hope that you caught on to that, because we're going to go to our next step, which is playing around with fraction towers to try and find equivalent fractions. Right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop down to this and show you that yesterday we explored an equivalent fraction for 1/2. And we showed that if you have yourself half full as a person, you would be at 1/2, but that's also the same as 2/4. That's what we're going to look for today. So how to find equivalent fractions using fraction towers. First, I'm going to challenge you to try and find fractions that are equal to 1/2. Do you see how that pink thing is about 1/2 the size of the one whole? That is equal to 1/2. So I'm going to challenge you to find your 1/2 pink fraction tower, and then you're going to try and see if you can find other fractions that are the exact same size as the 1/2 fraction tower. See? If I line these up, they line up perfectly. Now what I have to do is I actually have to write out my fractions for that. So I would write it like this. 1/2, and that's because I only have one pink block, so my numerator is 1, and the bottom, the denominator says 2, which is half, equals, and I'm going to have you guess what this yellow fraction tower is worth. Guess in your head before I show you. Alright, hopefully you guessed that the fraction that represents is 2/4. 2 because there's 2 blocks. 4 because it says that it is fourths on the bottom. So, you're going to be challenged today to find other things that line up with that. Here we go again. Let's try 3/6. 3/6 lines up with the other two as well. So, they're perfectly aligned. I know this is 3/6 because there's 1, 2, 3 blue blocks. So my numerator, my top number is 3. And the bottom says that we are talking about 6. The denominator is 6, 6, 6. So the denominator is 6. So I could say that these are equivalent fractions. They are all equal. So that's your challenge today, is to find fractions equal to 1/2. What I want you to do is I want you to take out your steno pad, your math notebook, pick a page, and I would like you to try and write down as many fractions as you think are equivalent. And we'll talk about if you were right tomorrow. So go on a scavenger hunt and build as many equivalent fractions as you can.